For all the things that need to change for SMU's defense to be even better in 2026 than it was last year, they should keep doing this one thing, and that's getting after the quarterback just like they did last year.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another week of Locked On SMU here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Appreciate you guys tapping in with us today. I'm Grayson Singleton. Coming up on the show today as well, more anonymous quotes about SMU and the way that they evaluate players and bring players in to the program. So I'm going to break some things down when it comes to that. Plus, with the new release of the ACC opponents that SMU basketball is going to face, is Andy Enfield now under even more scrutiny than he was last year? So we'll talk about that to close up the show as well. But let's jump right into the content for today. And SMU's defense, I think, is going to be really good. I've told you guys that before. I think it's going to be a lot better. I think it's going to be a little different, maybe a little bit more aggression with Maurice Crum calling plays and not Scott Simons anymore, who's since moved on to the NFL. But a lot of what we talked about when it comes to SMU's defense is that they've got to be better at this, they've got to be better at this, that, whatever, right? But we have neglected to talk about enough what SMU did well last year and that they should continue to do it into 2026, and that's get after the quarterback. Because it's one of those things where the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? So we think we've got better change at corner. We think we've got better change at nickel. And we think linebacker will be even better this year. Healthy Alex Kilgore, another year under his belt, Brandon Maizano, Brandon Booker, and whoever else slides into that rotation. But with all that change going on and all that necessary change, can we keep how SMU got after the passer the same? You know, like, it's one of those things where you think so much about the improvement and what's got to improve and what's got to change and all that, and then you forget, wait a minute, there was something they did really, really freaking well last year, and that's get after the quarterback. SMU last year had 4 guys that had 5 or more sacks in 2025. They ended up with 34 sacks as a team. That was third best in the ACC, one behind Clemson for second, and then Miami had 50 to lead the conference. So SMU was one of the elite teams at getting after the passer in 2025. And for all the things that we think they will be better at in 2026, corner, nickel, so on and so forth, if they can continue that production, along with that improvement, this team gets really, really scary on the defensive side of the ball. Because now you've got 2 strengths complementing each other. You've got lockdown corners that will give the defensive line even more opportunity to get after the quarterback. You know, there's something called coverage sacks. You know, there's the potential for a defensive line to bail out at secondary every now and then, because the quarterback's got to get rid of the football. So the 2 can work in tandem and be something very, very beautiful. And now that begs the question going forward is, okay, well, if you want to keep up that sort of production, which is a massive amount of production, I mean, 34 sacks in a college football season is pretty nice. It's pretty incredible. But who are you looking at? Because those cast of characters are gone from last year. The 4 guys that had 5 sacks or more last year, all of them are gone. They were Isaiah Smith, Terry Webb, Jeffrey Mbaugh, and Cam Robertson. The leading returning sack artist for SMU this year is Brandon Maizano, who had 2. So you're going to have to do some changes here. And I think there's some guys that can factor in. Obviously, Ja'Kai Lang and Nikhil Washington are guys that we've really been waiting on pins and needles to see what they can bring. But remember this about SMU's pass rush from last year, too. It wasn't just the edges. I'm interested more so to see, and I think edge will be fine. I don't know if it will be as good as Smith and Robertson on the edges, but I think it'll be fine. But what fascinated me the most was that from their interior defensive linemen, they got 10.5 sacks from Webb and Mbaugh. I want to know if that interior push can continue into 2026. So you're looking at a guy like a Christian Davis. You're looking at a guy like a Malcolm Alcorn-Crowder and other guys who will rotate in behind them at defensive tackle. Because edge pressure is one thing. You love that. You really do. Those are the guys that get drafted high in the NFL. Those are the guys that NFL teams really build their defense around, as if, can we have a quality edge rusher to go get the other team's quarterback? And those guys get paid more than handsomely. But in the college game, and even in the NFL too, if you can get some interior pressure, that's putting the hammer down. Because a quarterback has more time to react to somebody coming around the edge than they do a 320-pounder screaming right at their face. And it becomes a little bit disorienting a lot quicker. So if a guy like Christian Davis and a guy like Malcolm Alcorn-Crowder, who you brought over from Louisiana Tech and Kansas State respectively, can continue that interior push, okay, now that answers a question that I think was a little bit more of an anomaly from last year. I don't know how many FBS teams, and I haven't looked this up, but I don't know how many FBS teams had 10.5 sacks from their interior starting defensive tackles. Those two starting DTs combining for 10.5 sacks. I don't know how many other teams had that. And it was a real boost to SMU, not to mention that those guys obviously were more stout against the run as well, hence the job description. So if SMU can have defensive tackles that can be stout against the run, which we believe they will, and can continue that interior pressure, maybe you don't get 5 sacks from both Alcorn-Crowder and Davis, but you can still feel their presence and feel the interior pass rush that SMU had from a season ago. Now SMU, I think, is in a really, really good spot with the rest of its defense. And if they can continue that, and look, maybe they don't sack the quarterback 34 times. Maybe it's 28, 27 times, but they're constantly getting pressure, and the quarterback just might get rid of it and throw it away. You know, pass rushes look different. That's why there's the pass rush win rate metric that a lot of people keep track of. But maybe the number doesn't look as gaudy, but next year, if they can continue that, and the rest of the defense is getting better, the corners are playing better, you still have the knack for turnovers that SMU has had the last 2 years in the Power Four, and then you can keep what you had. Pretty good defense. Pretty good defense. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And with Maurice Crum now calling plays, should be an interesting time. And again, I continue to wonder, and I don't know this for a fact yet, I continue to wonder, are they going to get more aggressive in terms of bringing extra rushers, especially in pivotal situations in games, than they were last year? It's not a knock on Scott Simons. It's a question of, is this new defensive play caller going to have a different personality and a different way of going about certain junctures of a game than his predecessor was? That's the question I wonder, and that's the question I can't wait to see. All right, coming up next on Locked On SMU, just getting started on this Monday, SMU has drawn praise for how it evaluates people to bring into the program, and I'll tell you why that's a big deal as we continue on through this ACC journey of SMU. Coming up next year on Locked On SMU. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need to make the right hire, this is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, and location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I'm talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. It's less stress, less time, and with more results as well. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, welcome back to the show. Grayson Singleton here on a Monday, Locked On SMU. Appreciate you making us your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network that is available. Hey, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you like this content, this is the best place to go for the best analysis and opinion on SMU athletics here on Locked On SMU. Okay, so I want to read to you something from Athlon Sports when they continue to gather the anonymous quotes about each coach going into the 2026 season. We read you one late last week, but this one caught my eye as well. Quote, they do a great job with recruiting and the true evaluation of players. Just being able to get those guys in at that university. It's one of those high academic schools that you have to be able to get in and stay in. And that's true. And SMU, I think, has shown so far that you can be a very high-achieving academic school, which that is a hard school to get into, and still be a really good football team. And, you know, some programs have been kind of wishy-washy with that. Stanford is a really good example of this. Now, I think Stanford's academic standards are even higher than SMU's are, even though SMU's are pretty hard. But you look at Stanford, for instance, and they have been pretty dormant in football ever since Andrew Luck was there. And that was Lord knows how long ago. That was, what, 2010? Was he drafted in 2011? 2011, 2012? Was that draft with him and RG3 and Russell Wilson? Anyway, the fact that SMU can do this is pretty much an accomplishment. But I think what it comes down to, when you look at Rhett Lashlee, when you look at J.R. Sandlin, the general manager, and all the way down the line of guys making decisions, is that you have to be very, very intentional about who you're recruiting and who you're bringing in. Because you can't waste time. You got to be efficient. So when you hear somebody say they do a good job of evaluating players, you have to make sure you have the best players and the best people to fit your culture. In this day and age of college sports, it's a very dicey situation because now you've got the money involved, right? And everybody wants to make money. And if you've come to the show for somebody who is going to begrudge people for making money, this is the wrong show for you. I'm all in favor of people making as much money as they can. But when money enters the equation, it does complicate the proceedings. And now when you're at a school that there are more strenuous academic rigors and expectations, that can muddy the waters even more. But I also think this too, and this was something Brian Filker told me in our interview a couple of weeks ago. When you made the transition from the group of five to the power four, you had to identify the right players that were going to make that transition with you, and also know that you're not usually going to have your pick of the cream of the crop, right? Like Jalen Brewster being on campus for SMU, whether he signs with SMU or not, and seems to be having a good time at LSU, I'll tell you that. But whether he signs with SMU or not, the fact that you were able to get him on campus says a lot. But back to the evaluation part of all of this. I sense good things coming for SMU down the line as staying power. Because even though the recruiting class has not been as gaudy so far as it was in 2026, now in 2027, you always feel like when you hear people say their evaluations are pristine, you always feel like they've got the right dudes in the building. And there could be a negative connotation to some people that say, well, we're going for the right guys, so maybe we're sacrificing better football players or we're not getting good football players. Like, no. Watch the tape. Watch the tape on Quay Ford. Watch the tape on Amari Vickerson. Not Amari Vickerson, that was last year. Watch the tape on Malachi Ziegler. Watch the tape on Trey Harrelson. Right? Watch those guys' tapes, and you tell me if those are the wrong guys. So they are still getting really good football players, but you just kind of have to go about it a little bit different right now. And yes, Amari Vickerson is who I was talking about. So when it comes to evaluating and when it comes to building a team, the other part of that doesn't necessarily just mean high school recruiting. It means the transfer portal. Remember we talked to a transfer portal ad from a year ago, Yamir Knight. Yamir Knight was identified not just as a really good player, but as a leader too, and now he's likely going to be a captain. If you kind of read between the lines there's a chance that Yamir Knight is a captain in his second year with the program. I would say that's a good evaluation in getting the right people in the building. By the way, if you missed it, go back a couple weeks ago and watch our interview with Yamir Knight. But when you have a front office and you have a staff that is adept at getting the right guys in the building, gives me a lot of confidence that this thing is going to have staying power. And look, 1 year college football playoff, next year 9-win regular season, or 8-win regular season, excuse me, and then you win a bowl game. You start to wonder, okay, does this thing have staying power? Is this thing going to be the new cool thing that eventually wears off? Like, those questions are natural to have. But when other Power 4 people who have been doing this longer than SMU has say that, no, they know what they're doing in terms of identifying talent. No, they know they're on top of their stuff. They're getting the right guys in. That tells me this thing is going to have staying power. It's going to have staying power at the quarterback position beyond Kevin Jennings. You know, you're looking at Ty Hawkins and Cole Leinert and Malachi Ziegler. That tells you this thing's going to have staying power at the number one position on a football field. This thing's going to have staying power as coordinators continue to transition out. You lost both your coordinators after last year. That's what that tells me. It tells me that whenever we have a hole, we're going to be able to fill it. If we're devoid of leadership, okay, let's go get a guy here or elevate a guy that's already in-house. That's what that tells you, is that whatever can come for SMU in this haphazard era of college football right now, whatever happens, they'll be able to get the right guy in to fix it. It goes for players. It goes to the coaching staff. By the way, it probably goes to the recruiting staff as well. And we've talked about that team a couple of times on the show. Had one of them on the show, Brian Filker. You have the right guys in the building, you're going to be okay. And sometimes, by the way, you might outperform what people think you should do too. It's a big deal. It's a really, really big deal. So that's one of my favorite quotes that I've heard all off season, is that they do a great job with recruiting and the true evaluation of players. That's a big deal to me. Because when you can evaluate and get the right guys in the building, everybody knows when you have the right collection of people in the workplace, everything's good. You get a couple bad apples in there, might start to get problematic. So credit to SMU on that front for being able to always get the right players in the building. Coming up next, let's go to basketball, because we know the ACC opponents for next season. Can Andy Enfield elevate his performance to get SMU over the hump? Let's talk about it to close up the show next. All right, welcome back. Locked On SMU on a Monday, rounding things out. Hey, make sure you check out our Everydayer Club as well. If you want ad-free episodes of this show, Locked On SMU, all you got to do is sign up with the Everydayer Club. Go to lockedonsmu.supercast.com or click the link in the description or the show notes to learn more about the Everydayer Club. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. Again, lockedonsmu.supercast.com will get you ad-free shows compatible with Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and get you access to our members-only Discord group chat. Okay, so let's talk about basketball for a second. Let's talk about Andy Enfield. And we ended last week discussing, from three different angles, the release of SMU's ACC basketball opponents for next season. You get Georgia Tech and Louisville home and home. You're going to have Duke coming to town. You're going to have Clemson coming to town, and so on and so forth. You'll play North Carolina and Chapel Hill. You'll play Miami and Coral Gables, and we know the rest. Cal and Stanford are going to come to town as well. Thank the Lord for that. But what's one thing that's interesting that we didn't talk about was that when you're in the ACC, you are going to face a gauntlet of really good coaches. John Shire, Michael Malone. We'll see if he's as good of a college coach as he was in the league. Jay Lucas, I've told you guys, is a guy that I'm really high on. Brad Brownell at Clemson. The guy at Virginia, I think, is a pretty solid coach too. His name is slipping my mind right now. But you get the point. You're going to have college coaches that are really damn good. Really good at their job. And the question now becomes, you may not be able to out-talent them, but what's going to kick you over the top? And that's where we get back to Andy Enfield, our favorite coach here in the athletic department. Obviously, I mean that tongue-in-cheek. For some of you, I like him. But here's the thing. Andy Enfield got to the NCAA tournament last year, narrowly missed it the season before. He's got to show up. And when you look at this SMU team, you say, okay, this is a solid collection of guys. Like, I think these are some good players with some upside. Obviously, a little bit more length, a little bit more athleticism. Okay, cool. But let's not kid ourselves, right? You missed out on Terrence Brown Jr. from Utah, who transferred to North Carolina. Duke just keeps doing Duke-ish things. Miami is a solid program with an up-and-coming star at a coach. Brad Brownell is a star as a coach at Clemson. Andy Enfield, what are you going to do? Oh, by the way, Pat Kelsey at Louisville. Andy Enfield, what are you going to do? What is Andy Enfield going to do to evolve himself to make SMU basketball a better version of itself than what we saw last year? Because coaches can be responsible for a couple of wins a year, especially when your team is not the uber talented team that Duke is, that Louisville is, that North Carolina is, right? You saw a clunky Miami team, and I mean a clunky Miami team. A Miami team that did not shoot the basketball well. Offense was a little weird at times, but they were able to figure out ways to win, and they won enough games to be solidly in the NCAA tournament, in large part because of Jay Lucas. Andy Enfield, what is your version of that? Can Andy Enfield be the guy that elevates? Can Andy Enfield be a guy that we look at when we're breaking down a game and say, okay, that ATO was a real turning point there, or that lineup change was a real turning point there, or the way that he adjusted his rotation from what we're used to won them this game. Maybe transitioning between defensive schemes, which I will give him credit for. He did that decently well toward the tail end of last year. But those sorts of things that we can point to and say, man, the coach actually got us this game. And look, there have been some bright spots from Andy Enfield. Defense going through different coverages and showing different stuff. I think he did well last year. But the game plan they came out with and the way he got those guys ready to play at Cameron Indoor against Duke minus Boopy Miller on short notice, that can't go understated. That's a big deal that they didn't get their doors blown off in that game. In a game, by the way, that they easily could have. They got one of three against Louisville. Okay, you got the one at home. So there is some good here, but I think especially with the marquee opponents that are coming to Dallas next season, right? Remember that. They're coming to Dallas now. We're not going to North Carolina to play Duke. We're not going to South Carolina to play Clemson. Louisville's going to have a home and home. You're bringing good opponents to Moody Coliseum. And obviously the people that are going to show up, yes, they're going to want to see some of these historic programs, right? Like the Blue Devils. Okay, cool. But they do want to see you win. And SMU, hate to break it to you, is not going to be as talented as Duke. They're not going to be as talented as Carolina. They might be as talented as Clemson because I don't know what they're going to look like because that was an old team, a really old team last year, but they probably won't be as talented as Louisville either, especially in the front court, because Louisville paid a massive amount of money to revamp that front court. So all that said, what makes the difference? And a lot of times the answer is the coach. So Andy Enfield, what do you got? How are you going to be better? We've talked all offseason about the ways that SMU needs to get better. Defensively, rim protection, multiple ball handlers. And you got to give Andy Enfield credit for that too, because he is the point man on all of that. He identifies the problems. He does a lot of the recruiting to go get these guys to come in, and he deserves credit for that, because if your goal was to get more versatile, more switchable, longer, bigger, then you have accomplished that goal in the offseason. There's no two ways around that. He has accomplished that goal if that was your objective. But when it comes to getting back into coaching in-game in basketball, coaches can take you over the top when you may not be the most talented team. And they will not be the most talented team in a lot of these games. What are you going to do about it? And that's why I'm looking at Andy Enfield. Can he coach this team to success with the schedule that you're going to have and the opponents that you're bringing in to your building? Can Andy Enfield get it done in that regard? That'll be something I'm looking forward to seeing. And it should be fun. But Andy Enfield's got to get better, just like the team had to get better. And it looks like the team in some ways may have gotten better. Now can the coach do the same? All right, that'll do it for Locked On SMU here today on this Monday edition. Great start to the week. Appreciate you guys making us your first listen of the day. Make sure you check out the Everydayer Club as well. Get your ad-free shows, plus members-only Discord access and more. Go to lockedonsmu.supercast.com to learn more about the Everydayer Club. All right, for your second listen of the day, make sure you tap in with our 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure you make your second listen of the day Locked On College Basketball. I'm Grayson Singleton. See you Tuesday, everybody. Take it easy.